Chapter 2, Part 2 of An English Heritage.
Hop and Max used to run along this tunnel of leaves, Sebastian, Kip shouted, with their long coats flapping in the wind. Sometimes a gentle breeze would bring relief to the autumn sunshine, but more often it was a chilly wind that blew. Hop had written this in his diary, how the wind would blow in through the open sides and mess with Max's long hair, blowing it over his cold face as they hurried on their journey to the treehouse. Hop and Max was soon to be inseparable. From their first encounter, the boys knew it. They both felt it. What it was they felt was now mixed up in the mythology created around the heroic pair. Max had been Hop's best friend, and Hop had been Max's. They would be out together in all weathers, laughing and discussing all manner of subjects. No amount of rain or snow would keep the boys indoors, and they weren't afraid to be caught out in a storm. Unlike his brother, Kip hated the wind and the rain. He always felt cold. But Kip was right to fear the storms that would come and do battle with the trees and whip up the loose tiles on the mansion house or on the chapel roof. 8 years had slipped away into history when Hop and Max were out in all weathers, unafraid and oblivious to what was staring across the lands, for a storm did come. The most terrible storm, and by the new year, a year and 4 months after they had first grinned at each other in tutorial, it had wrecked everything.
"You've gone quiet," said Sebastian.
"What's up, pal?" "I was wondering why this Max guy fell out with my brother. Why did he hurt him in such a cruel way?" "Cruel? Well, that's what he wrote in his diary. Max has treated me so cruelly. Why?" "Sounds funny," said Sebastian. Kip reached into his bag. "I want to chronicle Hop's adventures," he said, holding out one of Hop's diaries. It was the book Hop cherished the most, the diary from 1985, all about Max and the conversations they had enjoyed together in their hideout. "What did you bring that for?" "So I can check for clues," Kip said. "Hop's words might read differently as I visit the actual places he wrote about, the places he visited with Max." "I suppose," he said, gawking at a huge fiberglass rabbit. "You should keep a diary, Sebastian. Hop's diary is full of the most curious adventures and the strangest occurrences imaginable. Have you ever thought, Sebastian, that if you were to die young, there would be no record of your existence?
"And what would be the point to living?"
All those horrible years at school." "There isn't any point, Kip. You just make the most of it. Anyway, why would anyone want to read my diary?" "Someone might," Kip said, watching how his friend was transfixed by the rabbit. Sebastian kicked the side of his shoe against the path and said, "Well, there's plenty of work for the squirrels to do. Acorns all around, scattered in their thousands." On entering the garden, Sebastian's skateboard curved to the left of the path and then sharply to the right. Here the path had rocks on either side, heavy ones, too heavy to lift 2 or even 3 people. The ground gave way to the acorns and was littered with conkers, and the reddish leaves from the trees above were starting to fall. The path continued its sharp turns, left then right, until Sebastian's wheels hit the gentler curve, sweeping him gracefully to the left. Kip watched as his friend glided past mysterious wooden totems and cryptic-looking metal monuments, grandiose representations of industrial relics. The rusting sculptures begged the observer to translate their meaning, to interpret their sense of being, and to suggest a new purpose to their very own existence. "A piece of junk," said Sebastian. "I don't think much of it either." The offending piece of welded metal was rusting in its calm isolation, as if diseased and quarantined from the other sculptures, on the soggy ground under a canopy of dying leaves. "I find this style of art depressing," Kip said. "There's no sense of hope." just decay and loss. This is what I feel when I look at a sculpture similar to this one. Hop had written in his diaries how this part of the garden became a favourite spot for students to hang out. Whether lying on the grass in spring or summer, or sitting on coats huddled together in autumn, students would bring their books and talk about some of our finer English poets, or read passages from authors long since buried underground. Some of the drama students would recite Shakespeare, or some of the more contemporary playwrights like Beckett or Shaw, or have a private bash at Wharton. In the centre of the lawn was a circle of evergreen trees. This arrangement suggested a theatre in the round. "High as a kite, that poor young thing," Kip said, as a youth sporting a beard staggered past them, his eyes glazed over and rambling on about the government. Hoppard often wrote how Max hated the anti-establishment mob. He said, "We're British, we're king and queen and all that." And he was dead against taking drugs. "But where would our cultural heritage be without drugs?" Sebastian stated. "All the best musicians and painters have experimented with drugs, haven't they?" "True," said Kit. "My record collection would be non-existent." The boys walked on towards the left, between two small, slim trees, Sebastian carrying his skateboard. On both sides of the path was a stream. It looked to be man-made, but neither could say for certain, with its water running between small rocks from what looked like an underground tunnel. This was the spot where Max gave Hop his first hug. "Not so sad," Max had said. Hop was feeling homesick at the time. Ahead, after walking by a series of strategically positioned upright red pipes, used as planters for small, delicate trailing cardiannuals, was a small round area of mud. The muddy patch had grey stone slabs placed around its edge in the centre of the grassy lawn. "You've no idea how it feels to lose a brother. I had my childhood ripped out, and now this." "Is this the place?" There was nothing for Sebastian to see, except the low outer walls of a replica building to the left, child-size, and obviously fake-looking, with gaps for what would have been a doorway and a window if it had been real. The building was made interesting by the dull patch of mud in front of it, a bare patch of nothingness, within a beautiful garden of flowers, shrubs, and artistic creations, muddy, drab, dull, and damp. A pool of rainwater hadn't seeped into the ground and was spoiling the smooth brown surface of the patch with its glistening cold stain. "This is a horrible place," Kit muttered. "You're right. This is not a nice place." The patch was where students would pause to stand and stare upwards at the grand size of the wondrous sight in front of them, but now there was nothing to blot out the sun, nor cast its long shadows across the ground, nothing to interrupt the silhouette of the treetops against the sky, nothing to give you that sense of wonder or adventure. The treehouse was lost to history. "I told you it had gone." Sebastian sighed. Not a footprint remained where there had once been a small door. Mere memories in the minds of those that had once had the courage to squeeze in and climb up the narrow trunk. Up they would go, Sebastian, squeezing themselves along until they had reached the entrance to the long wooden cabin above. They would stand looking out of its horizontal slots for windows, the slots where Hop had watched the rabbits circling, and Max had kept his brother warm by letting him borrow his thick woolly jumper before they'd wrap themselves up together in a blanket to read Frankenstein. "It's all in the diary, Sebastian. This is where Brian the Scarecrow, the scarecrow they had made during their first Halloween, sat on guard to scare away anyone brave enough to climb up inside." Sebastian listened intensely to every word Kip spoke, smiling and fingering his blonde hair. The treehouse had always been a place of fun for Hop and Max, a handy retreat for drunken nights or for an evening of intrigue and plotting. But all this history wasn't known to the other students at the college, for only Kip knew. He knew what went on in the treehouse, for he had his brother's diaries and drawings. I never got to see inside the treehouse. I never got to see inside when I came for my interview. I should have done, Sebastian, but my silly mother had to drive back to work, and now I'll never know. I believe if I had had the chance to climb up into the treehouse, I would have found answers to... Look, I'm sorry you didn't get to see inside, Kip, Sebastian said, but at least your brother gave you the diaries. Wait until you see what else I brought to the college. Not only his diaries and notebooks, I have his models and carvings, objects he made at school. And I'll always have his voice in my head to remember him by. That'll never go. Did I tell you how Hop would climb into my bed at night and how he'd tell me stories and talk about his dreams? But he wouldn't tell me everything. I knew my brother had his secrets, thoughts he was holding back. Hop always said to me, "When you're older, Kip, then I'll tell you my secrets." This is the perverseness of childhood, Kip, said Sebastian. You're never trusted with anything important. Adults think you're too immature to handle the important subjects. Well, now I am old enough and it's too late, and I hate him for keeping secrets. You don't hate him, Kip, said Sebastian, giving Kip a hug. Don't say this. But he should have told me his secrets while he could. I know, he said softly, I know.
End of Chapter 2, Part 2 of An English Heritage.